tell us a little bit about what it was like for you when you went out to raise capital early on, when you just had this idea. Kind of what was your experience?
Yeah, so as I'm sure you all know, fundraising is not easy. It is not the most fun part of the job, but it's also a necessary part of the job. So this is my second tech startup. I did my first tech startup about 9 years ago. I had a white male co-founder, and unsurprisingly, it was a lot easier to get money at that point. I am a solo founder this time around, and that made it exponentially more difficult. You're going to get turned down a lot, right? That's just the name of the game. On average, you can expect 35 no's for every one yes. And those odds are not good, right? No one likes to hear no, especially 35 times. So what I really wanted to do was focus on how do we minimize that? How do we make those odds better? And it starts with two things, I think, especially as an African-American or as a person of color. Don't expect anyone to give you the benefit of the doubt. When you come to them with an idea, when you come to them with a little bit of traction, you have to have more than that. You have to have a lot of things together. And so what I did, the best thing that I did was I started raising before I actually started raising, which meant that I formed relationships with venture capitalists way before I needed to ask them for money. Because they need to track you. They need to track your progress. They need to make sure that you're going to do what you say you can do, that they want to follow your success and be a part of your success. And that's what really helped us get funding. The first VC, who was our lead investor for our last round, our seed round, I had met 2 years prior and developed that relationship over 2 years before they said, yes, we're ready to commit.
Okay, so building those relationships early. Another question, just in general life, I think many of us who are minorities are familiar with the concept of code switching. When you are able to speak a certain way in your area of comfort, and then you have to switch that so as to not make others uncomfortable who may not look like you or come from where you're from. Do you find that there's any amount of code switching when engaging with investors, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think we all have to do that in our lives in general, right? But I think there's a certain way that you can do it. And I think you can do it in a way that is still very true to you and who you are, because you ultimately don't want people investing in you who don't really know you, who aren't really interested in you, or who are not going to support you on your journey, because as an entrepreneur, the company is you. So in terms of the language that you use, in terms of kind of the way that you present yourself, no, you're not talking to a friend. Make that clear, even though some of them do try to be very friendly, and they might be very friendly with companies that they've invested in and people that they've invested in for years. But know that this is a business deal, this is a business transaction, and so you want to put your business and game face on. And a big part of that is doing your research, doing your homework beforehand, and speaking in their language, right? It's really important to speak in their language, the terminology that they use, get comfortable with it. Don't expect them to, educate you on that terminology, because they're just not going to do that. So yes, there's definitely an element that you have to do with that, but ultimately you're hoping that you are finding the right VCs who won't run away when they actually do get to see the real you.
Now, in LA, compared to other regions, because I know both with Avisare and with your previous startup, you have done fundraising outside of just Los Angeles, obviously. How does the LA landscape for investors, not just VCs, but all investors, compare to other regions when it comes to their reception of, from your experience, you as a minority founder?
Yes. So it's hard for minorities fundraising anywhere. Let's just be very clear about that. That being said, I think LA is a really interesting ecosystem and a really good ecosystem for us to be fundraising now, because there is so much momentum around this. There are so many conversations around this. Some of it is BS, but a lot of it is from VCs who really mean it, right? They are really well-intentioned. They really do want to find the right companies, the right diverse companies to invest in. So it's a really interesting time for us, because I think of all the big places outside of San Francisco, you're probably going to have an easier time raising funds here in LA with this ecosystem. My last company we raised in New York, and it was about 9 years ago, and it was just a very, very different fundraising environment. So it's progressed a lot.
do you think that the presence of potentially like non-traditional investors, we've heard from a number of folks who are celebrities and a few more later about their experience in investing, do you think that that helps make a slightly easier path in Los Angeles for minorities who can possibly be able to connect to former athletes, entertainers that are now segueing later in their career into becoming investors?
Absolutely, because investors invest in what they know in and what they feel comfortable in and who they feel comfortable with. So the more people that we can get on the other side of the table who have the funds, who are investing into people like us who feel comfortable with us, the better it is. So I think it helps tremendously, especially to have them inside some of these larger venture capital firms, because it's all about access to money, right? Access to funding. So that definitely helps the ecosystem.
One more question. I'm curious, given that there are so many different rounds in fundraising, do you find that there is one round or a series of rounds where it's more challenging as a minority? I know that for a number of startups, they're able to go out to family and friends to fundraise, whereas minorities historically do not have as much access to capital. So that's more difficult to do. Do you feel like the seed round is exceptionally more challenging for minority founders, or is it just get harder and harder the later you are in your funding rounds?
I know that for the friends and family round, typically for minorities, that is the most challenging because you really need people who have money to invest in just you. You don't have anything yet, right? It's hard to start a business if you don't actually have the money to invest in anything. So if you don't have that network, like I didn't have that network of friends and family who could just give me $25,000, $50,000, write $75,000 checks, I wish I did, immediately to just fund your idea to get something out there. So that is traditionally very hard. But then once you start getting into the seed round and you start to go after more institutional investors or even higher angel investors who write bigger dollar checks, now you have to not only sell your vision, but ultimately sell some traction. And traction is always hard to get to with fewer dollars. But then, of course, then when you get to your Series A, it's now no longer not necessarily just about the team. It's no longer necessarily just about some of the traction that you have. It's about hard dollars and cents, right? What have you been able to accomplish? How quickly have you been able to accomplish it? What is the path that this business is taking? What's your cost of customer acquisition? What size market, true market sizing that you can reach with that certain dollar amount. So I think those first three rounds are really, really difficult. And then after that, you should, as a business, hopefully, have enough to pretty much kind of stand on your own in trying to get more money for growth and not necessarily just to keep the business afloat.
Now, we heard from Sarah Koch from the Case Foundation a little bit earlier, and Case Foundation, they take a unique approach where they engage in impact investing. So they'll take a little bit of their portfolio funding, and they will actually invest in early-stage companies. Do you think that that is a model that other philanthropies should be looking at, should be replicating, or should the focus really be on, hey, we need to turn the VCs and angel investors' attention to the groundswell of high-quality minority founders that are, launching amazing innovations? Or is it a combination of both? I
think it's definitely a combination of both because ultimately you need money. Now you do want smart money. You want money that can actually help your business move forward because let's be clear, it's not just about the actual dollar amount that you're raising, but it's about how can you get traction, how can you move from where you're at now to a higher level with that money that you're getting. So philanthropic dollars should focus more on minority and women-owned businesses because it is so hard. But yeah, we need those angel investors and those VCs to be shelling out money to more of us in the community because some of the things that they invest in, I'm just like, why? Right. Why are you throwing your money away? If you want to throw your money away, I know plenty of people who can use it, myself included.
As a founder, if you were to provide advice to the aspiring founders here today, as a minority, as a woman, and let's say you were starting your business all over again, given what you know and what you have experienced through your journey, what is the one piece of advice that you would offer to the group?
I'd say that forming relationships early on, especially with venture capitalists and with investors, is so important, is so critical that I can't overemphasize it enough. The one thing that I would have done before actually I started my first company, well, actually I did this with my first company, is I worked for an early stage company, right? And so I got to see firsthand how they were running things. When you're an early stage, when you're a very small team, you're going to get introduced to some of those VCs because they want to know who the team is. So you can start forming those relationships really, really early, and they can see your progress and what you can accomplish. And then that makes them much more comfortable if at another point, later on, that you want to go out on your own because they already know who you are. So any way that you can form relationships with people, do not ask them for money on your first meeting because that always turns people off. But if you can ask them for advice, if you can take them out for coffee, if you can just say, hey, look, I'd love to get your opinion on this idea, and here's what I've done, and can I keep in touch with you? That is super important. So if I had only one thing to say, I'd say do that.
Excellent. Build the relationships. Thank you so much, Sky. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Best of luck with Avisare.